بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Among the great blessings and ni'mas that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed upon us is our collective unity as an ummah, which means a nation, which implies there is a form of unity between us as believers. This is a huge ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states this in the Quran, where He mentions how the Ansar and the Muhajirun, these two groups, they were actually against one another. Rather, even amongst the Ansar. So the Muhajirun, meaning the emigrants, these are the ones who lived in Mecca when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam emigrated from Mecca to Medina. They had a new beginning. So this was a group that came with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and which marks the Islamic calendar, the hijrah or the emigration. The group that came into Medina, they're foreigners. They're called the Muhajirun, or those who have emigrated, or you could say the foreigners. The Ansar were another group in Medina. They were the locals. These were the individuals who invited Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, invited the Sahaba, opened their homes, opened their pockets, did whatever they could to serve the Muhajirun. Before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to Medina, before the immigration, the Ansar were at war with one another. You had two major tribes of the Ansar. You had what's called the Aus and the Khazraj. These are two different major tribes of the Ansar, and they were rivals. They would fight one another. And some scholars state that it was over trivial matters. Maybe decades passed, or even over 100 years passed. Someone's camel was grazing on someone else's grass. This led to something else, started a fight, and then it just became rivalry, generation after generation, an inherited rivalry. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to Medina and they accepted Islam. When he came, and this is the intelligence and genius of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the first thing he did was to dismantle this infighting as well as any kind of possible fighting between the Muhajirun and the Ansar. So he resolved the fighting between the Ansar themselves by unifying them through Islam. Now a person from Aus has to be brothers with a person from Khazraj. They have to meet up in the same masjid. They have to perform salah together, all under the banner of Islam, under the banner of Tawheed and believing in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought something so great to them, which was the belief in one Allah and the belief that we will have a reckoning after we die. And this caused them to have unity between among one another. The second thing that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did was, after sharing Islam with them, he quelled any kind of possible hostilities between the Ansar and the Muhajirun. So Muhajirun are coming from Mecca, such as Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali. All of these are Muhajirun. They've emigrated with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, some even before him. So they're coming into this foreign land, and you have a group of people that are sharing their land with them. And there is a possibility of hostilities here, that you're going to be staying in my area, there's going to be competition, you're going to be engaging in business, you might be taken away from my clients, etc. All of these thoughts could be possible in their minds. However, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, being the leader that he was, established something which is known in history as the muwakha, or the brotherhood. This brotherhood was a very strong pact that he made. He would assign an individual from the Muhajirun. These are travelers. They left everything behind. They don't have any money, no homes. A lot of their families are left in Mecca because they didn't become Muslim. He would assign one of them to a brother. He would forge this brotherhood between them, someone from the Ansar. So you have an Ansari. He has to be the host for the Muhajir. In this way, he created a bond between these two individuals, because now he told them, you're actually brothers. So much so that if one of them dies, they would inherit from their brother. right? The one that's alive would inherit from the brother. This was a temporary thing. In today's time, there's no such thing anymore. You only inherit from your blood relatives. But at the time, this was something that he forged. So Rasulullah quelled any kind of enmity that could be possible by forging this brotherhood. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually mentions this in the Quran, and He says that it was only through the rahmah and mercy of Allah that this could be possible. If it wasn't for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this would actually be impossible to do. It was something that is beyond words. We do not see any kind of similarities between this and what we have in today's time. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had divinely aided Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to do this. So what I was saying is that this is a huge thing in Islam. It's one of the integral aspects of Islam, unity. And we always hear this word ummah. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam always caring for his ummah. This is the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We're part of that. And being part of that, we do not consider, or we don't really look into race, ethnicity, background. All of these things disappear under the banner of Tawheed and accepting the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He states about this brotherhood, إِنَّ هَذِهِ أُمَّتُكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً وَأَنَا رَبُّكُمْ فَاعْبُدُونَ. This ummah is one ummah, and I am your Lord, so worship me. So we all come together in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and all ethnicities, nationalities, borders are broken down. The only thing that remains is our slavery and our servanthood to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala under the guidance of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَكُونُوا مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. Do not be among the polytheists. What is the attribute of the polytheists? مِنَ الَّذِينَ فَرَّقُوا دِينَهُمْ وَكَانُوا شِيَعًا. The polytheists, those who split up their religion and they became several groups. كُلُّ حِزْبٍ بِمَا لَدَيْهِمْ فَرِحُونَ. Every group amongst them is happy with that which they have, and they do not like that which others have. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't do that. You are one ummah. Do not have this trait of mushrikun, of polytheists, those who are against tawheed, which is sectarianism. Do not have this. This goes against the dictates of Islam and the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So as we see throughout the Quran, there's so many exhortations, commandments to unify. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةً فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ أَخَوَيْكُمْ. Indeed, all believers are brothers. So solve and rectify any kind of disputes you have between your brothers. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. Allah does not want us to splinter into various factions and state that what I have is better than what they have. Rather, we should focus on what we have in common. Yes, we do understand that Islam has developed over 1400 years. There's madhabs, there are groups in beliefs, there's a wide array of different aspects and people of different backgrounds and different schools. However, the overarching message of the Quran is to melt all of that away. Try your best to see what you have in common and try to ignore, unless you're talking about a scholarly discussion. Yes, we do discuss these kind of things in academia, in our traditional madaris. However, in practicality, we try our best to create bridges and unity. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, as I was saying. The enemies of Islam, their first goal is to create sectarianism, is to create splinters and factions within the ummah. A smart enemy would do that. Why? Because the ummah itself will splinter and they'll fight one another, and you don't have to fight at all. Create enmity between them and they'll do the rest. This is a very old tactic. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Qasas the methodology of Fir'aun, the Fir'aun of Musa alayhi salam's time. Inna Fir'auna ala fil ard wa ja'ala ahlaha shi'a istad'ifu ta'ifatan minhum. Indeed, Fir'aun gained power and prowess in the land of Egypt. وَجَعَلَ أَهْلَهَا شِيَعًا. And he took all of the people of Egypt, referring to the Banu Israel who spread in Egypt after Yusuf alayhi salam came with his family. Generations passed. Yusuf alayhi salam, of course, he and his brothers formed the Banu Israel, and they became in the thousands and tens of thousands of individuals over decades and hundreds of years. So Fir'aun gained power, and what he did is he splintered the Banu Israel. How so? It is reported in some tafsirs about when they wanted some water source. After they defeated Fir'aun, they wanted a water source. So Musa alayhi salam struck a rock with his staff, and the rock started to flow with water. However, they were not happy with that. They said, we want 12 different springs because we are 12 different tribes. I don't want to drink from the water of that tribe. Mind you, they're in the desert trying to go to Damascus after having defeated Fir'aun, after having witnessed the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through Musa alayhi salam. Still they say, I don't want to drink the water of this person from another tribe, instead of being under the banner of Tawheed and the worship of Allah. So Fir'aun is the one that split them up into these separate groups, and in this way he could go and easily pick one group, and then the other group wouldn't be upset about it. And that is the harm of sectarianism, of breaking up the unity in the ummah. When we feel like there are borders, right? I'm an American, that person is from a different country. I am from this background, I'm from a Bangladeshi background, this person is Pakistani, or this person is Russian. They're different. This allows an individual to go and pluck them up without me having to care. He won't bat an eye. Only when he attacks my group and my family and a person from my nationality and ethnicity, only then will that raise an eyebrow. So this is the tactic that is very old. Fir'aun was employing this. And this is what we see even to this date. All these different borders that we have is causing this. In Islam, hatred for anyone actually. And there are different categories of hatred, but especially amongst Muslims, and especially one with their own family members. This type of hatred is prohibited. Yes, there are types of hatred that are allowed. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Man abghada lillah." He mentions 4 different things. Among them, he says, "Man abghada lillah, faqad istakmala al-iman." Among these 4, the other ones is loving for Allah, advising for Allah, etc. But he says, one who hates for the sake of Allah has completed their iman. What does it mean that a person can hate for the sake of Allah? You know what they say, that hate the sin, not the sinner, that type of attitude. Or those who are causing corruption in the land, we hate what they're doing and we want to put an end to it. That is part of faith as well. Because if you don't hate the corruption that's happening, you will never put an end to it. So we hate those due to the corruption that they have. This is part of our faith as well. However, what I'm going to talk about here is the prohibition of hatred in general, not due to corruption and other sins, etc. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He states in the Quran, what is the source of hatred? If you and I feel that I hate someone, and this is not due to religious purposes, I just dislike this person due to whatever ulterior motive I have. Maybe they looked at me wrong. Maybe they said something that offended me. Maybe they behave in a manner that just doesn't, vibe with me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about where that came from. You might be thinking, okay, it's there now. We usually don't think about the origins of our emotions. He says in Surah Al-Ma'idah, إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ الشَّيْطَانُ أَن يُوقِعَ بَيْنَكُمُ الْعَدَاوَةَ وَالْبَغْضَاءَ. Indeed, Shaitan, Iblis, the accursed, he wishes to create enmity and hatred between you, and he utilizes fil khamri wal maisir. He uses wine to do this, and he uses gambling to do this as well. These are the tools of Fir'aun, as well as women, money, power. All of these are tools of Shaitan, entertainment, and his ultimate goal is to cause splinters and factions within the ummah, because this allows the ummah to be defeated, and that's his ultimate goal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is stating that when you feel this enmity towards a person, and again, the disclaimer here is that we're not talking about religious hatred. There is a type of religious hatred, not in the sense of racism or prejudice, but when I see sin, I dislike it in my heart. That is something that is actually good. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that the other kinds of hatred, based off of racism, based off of, someone has done something to me and I am incapable of forgiving that person, the source of that is Shaitan. He comes and he whispers to us. He utilizes all of these methods that he has. Imagine an individual who has lived for tens of thousands of years. Even if he's really stupid, which to a degree, shaitan is pretty dumb. All he has to do is do sajda to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do tawbah, and he can go to Jannah, but he prefers Jahannam. So he has a level of, idiocy, if you will. However, on the other hand, shaitan is quite intelligent. He's had thousands of years to formulate a plan. And what you see that is happening before you is the unraveling of the plan of shaitan. He has an end game. Alhamdulillah, we're told that his end game will fail, but he keeps on going, and he's had thousands of years to plan this and to inspire individuals and to whisper to others. So shaitan, part of that plan is to cause you to hate. So if we have hatred for another person, especially a family member or another Muslim, this is the effect of shaitan in our life. And as I mentioned, hatred is absolutely prohibited. There is a hadith narrated by Az-Zubayr bin al-Awwam radiyallahu anhu, is the cousin of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He states that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Dabba ilaykum da'ul umam." Pretty soon, the disease that destroys nations will come upon you. What is that disease? Al-hasadu wal-baghda, jealousy and hatred. It says pretty soon this will come into the ummah, and these two diseases destroy nations. They've destroyed previous nations, and they will destroy you as well. Hiya al-haliqa. He says it is the shaver. These two things are the shaver, is what Rasulullah calls it. La aqulu tahliqu sha'r. He says, I'm not saying this shaves hair. Walakin tahliqu din. What it will do is shave your deen. The way when you use a blade to line yourself up or to shave your head or whatever it is, it completely removes it. There's no trace. If it's a good blade, there's no trace of that hair left. This is what hasad, jealousy, and baghda and hatred will do to your religion. It will leave nothing else. It will swallow everything that you have. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this hadith, he says, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِ بِيَدِهِ. I take an oath in the individual in whose hand lies my life. Meaning, I take an oath by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لا تدخلوا الجنة حتى تؤمنوا. You cannot enter Jannah and paradise until you have faith. ولا تؤمنوا حتى تحابوا. And you will not have faith until you love one another. He says, basically, you cannot enter Jannah until you have love for one another. He's addressing the Muslims. If you do not have love for one another as brothers and sisters in Islam, then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that your iman and your faith in Allah is not complete. If your faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not complete, then that affects your entrance into Jannah. Now the question is, how does this come into us? We've already mentioned one of the sources is shaitan himself, and this is his grand plan to cause the ummah to splinter. Remember when in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the time of the Khulafa Rashidun, the rightly guided Khulafa, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali radiyallahu anhum, and then those after them as well, we had the Khilafah. And this was the unity amongst Muslims. Islam was a formidable force in the world. Why do we have this dhul and this disgrace that we have, that we're all witnessing? Also understand the fact that you and I feel like this is the norm. This is actually something very odd. We're born in a very odd time. The standard has always been Islam being unified. Yes, there are certain factions and groups, but there's always a unifying body. Whether it be the Umayyah, the Uthmaniyya, etc. Yes, you might come and say, oh, that they're splintered within themselves. Of course, but that's, internal aspects. Now we don't even have that. So we're born in a very peculiar age. So the question is, how does this appear? How does this come into our lives? Well, there's many reasons. Some that we can think of is, you might have an issue with another. I know I've been talking about it in a grand scale, but I want to zoom in on our individual lives. And if you find this, that you have some dislike for an individual, a family member, a person that you commonly see, even if they're non-Muslim, a coworker, you just dislike them for other than religious reasons, why might that occur? Number one, we're traumatized by something. And this anxiety due to that trauma is causing me to react in a way that I dislike this person now. I associate this person with pain and hurt, right? So for instance, this person said something bad to me, or when I was younger, I was physically abused by this individual. This is very debilitating. And every time I see this individual, I'm going to be reminded of what they put me through. And this causes a level of pain, and I react to that with hatred. Another reason is our covetousness of dunya. We see an individual who has apparently succeeded, and remember, success is only known in the hereafter. There are signs of that you're going to be successful in the hereafter. You're performing your salah, you're staying away from sin. But true success will be seen on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Just because a person has a lot of wealth, they have physical wealth, money, cars, homes, etc. This does not mean that they're successful for a Muslim. We need to redefine our understanding of success. Success is Allah's pleasure, our adherence to the deen of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is success. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that. So if I do not have this understanding in my mind, I'm going to pursue the wrong means because I'm seeking the wrong success. And ultimately that success, if it is without Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the akhirah, it's going to be a source of failure because we spent time away from Allah and His deen. So covetousness, another reason why we may have hatred for another person, which leads to jealousy, envy, all of these different things. We see that they have a lot of physical dunya. They've attained a lot, they've amassed a lot. And we feel like, I'm better than that person. We used to be classmates. They used to fail all the time. I used to pass the class. Why are they in this position and I am where I am? And then you start to dislike them due to that. Another reason could be negative thoughts and suspicions that we have of people. And we're commanded in Islam, as long as there is no sign, to always think good of people. This is how unfortunate, in today's time it's the opposite. Muslims are the ones that think pretty bad about people. Right? I mean, this is general, non-Muslims as well, but sometimes we find non-Muslims who really think good about people. But oftentimes we find ourselves having su'ul dhan, thinking bad about individuals, and these thoughts create your own drama in your mind, and then you end up hating people. So and there's many other factors. In one hadith, Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu states that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Iyyakum al-dhann." Be very cautious of having bad thoughts. Do not allow these bad thoughts to creep in your mind. Someone brushed you off. Someone said something a little bit rude to you. You don't know what that person's going through. Maybe they had a really rough day. Can't you excuse them for that? When you have a really rough day, you excuse yourself automatically. You say, oh, I'm sorry, I was having a tough day. I apologize for that. So expect the same for them. Instead of stating in your mind that this is a horrible person, I'm going to hold a grudge from now on. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Iyyakum al-dhann." Be very cautious, be aware of negative thoughts. فَإِنَّ الظَّنَّ أَكْذَبَ الْحَدِيثِ. Because these negative thoughts are lies. You are telling yourself lies regarding this individual, unless you have bona fide proof. Okay. And of course, we talked about the love of dunya. Umar radiallahu anhu, he states that he heard the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, لا تفتح الدنيا على أحد إلا ألقى الله عز وجل بينهم العداوة والبغضاء إلى يوم القيامة. Never are the doors of dunya opened, except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will create enmity and hatred between people. And this will keep on happening until Yawm al-Qiyamah. Every time the doors of dunya are involved, people are really happy and brothers and everything's good. As soon as money's involved, you'll see the difference. You'll see people acting differently. You have your best friends, and my advice is don't engage in business with your best friends. Best friends, all happy, everything's going well. As soon as they start a joint venture and money's involved, then you see the true character of people. This person taking a little bit more than they deserve. This person being deprived of their portion. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is absolutely correct. As soon as the doors of dunya are opened, that is when hatred starts to come into the ummah. So these are various reasons why we might start hating another individual. Why is it harmful? Why can't I hate? Right? I'm trying to convince you. I don't know if I'm doing a good job. I'm trying to convince you not to hate. This is not beneficial. Rasulullah in one hadith, he told that individual who came to him, give me some advice. He says, "La taghdab," don't get angry. And he repeated it 3 times. Don't get angry. Don't get angry. It's not beneficial. It's not going to do anything good for you. So if you feel this hatred towards anyone, especially our parents, our children, those closest to us, our spouses, how often do we see spouses hating one another? The only reason they're sticking through that marriage is because they have children. It's hatred. So why is this so harmful? The first and foremost reason, and I hope to convince you, is that you're only hurting yourself. When you hate someone else, are you actually damaging that person? You're doing something to harm them? You are burning inside. Every time you see this person that you hate, you feel bad. You're not comfortable. You need to leave the area. Is that person uncomfortable? They're smiling, they're laughing, they're having a great time. You are hurting yourself by hating another individual. If it festers, if you don't speak about it, it's going to develop mental illnesses. Another one is that it creates self-hate. You start to hate yourself. Psychologically, you start to dislike your own self because you realize, I'm a bad person. I have hatred for so many people. When you start reflecting and you're honest with yourself, you realize that I'm sour, I'm bitter. I don't even like to be around myself, let alone other people being around me. You develop self-hatred. The third reason, as I've mentioned in the beginning of the khutbah, it breaks up the ummah. You may be thinking, I'm just one individual, I'm not that big of a person. You are doing a small splinter. You're causing a small faction to appear in the ummah. These cliques and these groups, and ignoring another Muslim because of whatever reason, they're from a different country or they behave this way, or a family member, dividing that family. This is absolutely impermissible. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to be a strong family unit, and the world today wants us to be separated. And this extends to even ulama. It's so sad to see scholars, because I come from this school and this person comes from that school, I don't want to hear anything that that person says. And this is widespread. If you don't know about it, alhamdulillah, I don't want to introduce those kind of things. But if you're aware of these kind of scholars going on these platforms for everyone to see and speaking bad about that person and only highlighting the negativity. Why is it we see these people on these platforms? They only highlight the negative aspects of other scholars. They never say, wow, he's such a great speaker, or mashallah, he's very pious. There's only, okay, he did this wrong. Look at how they're acting and behaving in this situation. This is breaking up the ummah. Traditionally speaking, and when we were taught by our teachers, they always told us to go in private and discuss these issues with the scholars and never open it up to the masses. Never let people know that there's a rift happening. And we present ourselves as unified, because this really damages the ummah. Do you think Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would be happy with this? As an individual, as a scholar, you're hating publicly on another scholar, trying to take perhaps his audience. Where's the ikhlas in that? Where's the sincerity? And I don't think Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would be happy with that. Rather, he would prefer us to go in solitude and discuss with this individual and come to terms. At least know what we disagree on and agree to disagree. Now, hatred. Another reason why you and I shouldn't have hatred, I've already talked about this developing into mental illnesses, etc., is that it'll develop into these negative traits. Your hatred for another person, if you hate that person and you see them succeeding, you're going to become jealous. Why? Because you hate them, you think them inferior. Now you see them developing, becoming better, having a crowd, or having people around them, or getting a lot of money, or doing well for themselves, or increasing their family, having more children, then their children being successful, and then your children aren't so successful. This is going to create jealousy. It's going to create envy. This leads to ghiba. Why do people do ghiba? Ghiba meaning talking trash behind another person's back. Why do you do that? It's because you dislike that person. If you love another person, you're not going to do ghiba behind their back. How often do you find your own friends, you're with an individual, you're having lunch with, like, let's say 3-4 people. One person leaves from that gathering and now everyone's talking about that person. If you witness this, or if you're doing this, please stop. This is destroying your deen. Rasulullah says this is worse than fornication. This act that you're doing, you think it's so light. I'm just talking a little bit. It's worse than fornication. Now, if you're not doing it, but you're listening to it, imagine when you leave, are your friends going to be talking good about you? Those same individuals who do ghiba about other people are doing it about you too. So this destroys communication. It destroys family units, and this leads to nifaq and hypocrisy. I want to summarize. How do we overcome hatred? A few points, inshallah. We all need to reflect. I want everyone to reflect, inshallah. My current state and my relationships with people in my life. And start with those closest to you, your spouse, your children, your parents, and then move outward. What is that situation? And if it's sour, if I have a bad relationship, why so? What is causing this? And you might find that They did something to you, they traumatized you, and because of that, I have negative, ill feelings towards them. So, how do I overcome this? Because I don't want this in my life. Number one, understand that difficulties are a test from Allah. So, if this person has done something traumatic to you, and of course, I'm not saying it's okay, but understand that Allah is testing you with that. It came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ultimately. He's watching how you react to that. And if you think about it that way, then you can step up to that challenge and you say, "Oh Allah, give me the strength to make a du'a to Allah to overcome this challenge," and you start making steps towards it. The second point I want you to keep in mind is, like I mentioned earlier, there's no point in hatred. You're only harming yourself. You don't harm that individual if you hate them. Yes, if you act out and your hatred reaches a level where you physically harm them, then you're going to harm them. If they survive, you're going to prison, and they're not. So it's a double-edged sword. But in general, holding that in, it does nothing but harm you. Number three is develop ikhlas. Do things for the sake of Allah. Usually when we're let down, especially by our children or parents or our spouse, we're let down by them. It hurts us, and then we start developing negative feelings. Or if you did something for someone and they didn't appreciate what you did, then it hurts and it develops into hatred. If we do things only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, we won't even be thinking about that. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the pious, and they give food to those who are poor, and they say, لا نريد منكم جزاء ولا شكورا إنما نطعمكم لوجه الله. They say, we don't want any kind of recompense. We don't want you to pay us for this. We don't even want you to say thank you. We do it only so Allah can be happy. Imagine that. How often do you and I do things and we want to thank you? The pious in the Quran, they feed and they tell the poor people, don't even say thank you. I just want Allah to be happy. And some people were known to cover their faces, give food to other people, and run away because they only want recognition from Allah. And the last thing, if you and I are having these issues with an individual, don't let it fester in yourself. Talk it out. This requires courage. Most of the world, including ourselves, will find that we're cowards. We are cowardly. When someone does something wrong to us, we smile at them. As soon as they leave, we complain to others. This is a coward's stance. Be brave. Go to them, speak nicely, and say, this occurred. You did this to me. I was hurt by that. Talk it out. You'll see after one single conversation, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will create love. Or if you heard something through the grapevine, someone told you this person said that, which is called namima, carrying tales, but you heard someone talking trash about you. Instead of verifying that information, you talk more trash back. And that's what that person wants. He's going to carry it back to them. So instead of that, go to the person directly and say, I heard this, that you're saying this about me. Is this true? If so, allow me to explain why I did this or that. Or you ask them, is this true or not? What if they say, no, it's not true? Then you'd be hating them for no reason. So verify, talk it out. And I said that was the last thing, but one more point, inshallah, is that the need for counseling when it's necessary. You and I, sometimes we brush off counseling like it's nothing. It's actually something that has a lot of power. And the Sahaba, whenever they had a necessity or they had an issue, they would go to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for counseling. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was their counselor. There's one story of an individual, a young man. It shows you his ikhlas as well. He comes to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I'm sure none of us would do this. Neither would an individual like us go to an imam for this, nor would the imam react in this manner. This is ikhlas from both sides. This young man comes to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he says, "O Messenger of Allah, give me permission to fornicate. I want to have zina. I want to fornicate with this woman. Give me some ijazah." So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what did he say? Did he say, "Get out of here. I don't want to see your face. Where's Umar radiallahu anhu? Give him that sharp sword. Lop this guy's head off." None of that. He didn't even get upset. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's their counselor. So he says, "Give me permission to do zina. I want to fornicate." So what did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam do? This emotional intelligence of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, "Do you have a mother? Do you have a sister?" He said, "Yeah, I have a mother and I have a sister." He said, "Would you like it if someone does zina with your mother? Would you like for someone to do zina with your sister? Fornicate with them?" He said, "Absolutely not. I can't even think of that." So then Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, That woman that you want to fornicate with, don't you think that she's a mother? Or maybe she's a sister? Or maybe she's a daughter? And then he understood. He said, okay, yeah, that totally makes sense. I don't want that to happen. And he went away, and that quelled those desires. This is the counseling of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So let us not undermine counseling if we need it. If we have this debilitating hatred, jealousy, hatred, and envy towards other people, we should seek counseling. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq, to remove these spiritual maladies and diseases from ourselves, to give us mental clarity, spiritual excellence, and give us tawfiq to have His forgiveness and follow the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.